Sie vor ein paar Jahren geahnt, welche ungeheure Entwicklung das mobile Internet machen wird? Jeder ist ja praktisch ständig und überall online. Das bringt viele Gefahren mit sich, über die wir in Deutschland ganz besonders gerne reden, aber eben auch völlig neue Möglichkeiten im öffentlichen Raum zu agieren. Und durch das ständige Sammeln von Umgebungsinformationen, durch die Masse an Inhalten, Peter Weibel hat es vorhin gesagt, die User beitragen, kann man natürlich auch die tollsten Sachen machen. Was gibt es heute bereits an Apps, die den öffentlichen Raum kreativ nutzen? Was gibt es an Kunstinstallationen, die zur Interaktion einladen? Wo wird sich das alles noch hin entwickeln in den nächsten Jahren, wenn die Geräte immer noch schneller werden, das Internet immer schneller wird, überall es auch noch leichter ist, wie jetzt hier in Karlsruhe zum Beispiel, dass man ein öffentliches WLAN hat und so weiter, also dass man wirklich schnelle, kostenlose Zugänge hat. Das sagt uns in der Keynote Siegel. Er ist Head of Interaction and Online Experience bei Fabrica, Forschungszentrum und Kreativschmiede der Benetton Group in Treviso. Er hat digitale Medienkunst in San Jose und Design- und Medienkunst in LA studiert und arbeitet heute interdisziplinär mit Schwerpunkt Informationsdesign und interaktive Kunst und ist extra aus LA zu uns gekommen. Public Interface, Reimagining Urban Experience heißt sein Vortrag.
Good evening. I'm very honored to be here with all of you tonight. It's my first time at ZKM. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own history with creative technologies and kind of tell you about how it led to my current interests in mobile devices and public space. This is where I grew up. I lived outside of a small town in Northern California, in wine country. And this is what most of the land looks like, just vineyards for wine grapes. And I felt a little bit out of place because I wasn't very interested in agriculture, but I was very interested in technology. And so naturally I got into computers because they were enabling me to create things in new ways that I never imagined before. And I got really interested in the internet because it allowed me to immediately share the things that I created. When I went to college, I moved to San Jose, got my BFA in digital media art at San Jose State University, and then later on moved to Los Angeles for grad school at UCLA, where I got my master's in design media art. Both of which are very liberal arts programs, but they have a technology focus, and they put a lot of emphasis on kind of self-discovery of technology and applying it to conceptual arts. And naturally, moving to these places kind of was a big adjustment for me. So I ended up in these big cities, coming from my little small town of Healdsburg, 10,000 people, moving immediately to a city of 1 million people, and then later to a city of 4 million people. And I had to, make some adjustments and get used to some things. I was living in tiny apartments, I was sharing rooms with roommates, and all of a sudden, public space, which I never really valued before, had all of this value to me. So I already had this interest in interactive art. I already had this interest in data visualization. They began to overlap upon themselves and then overlap on my new interest in public space. After grad school, I began working in a variety of different areas between art and science. I started working at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, writing custom data visualization software to look at climate data from Mars. And then later working for the MIT Sensible City Lab, looking at taxi activity, cell phone activity, the number of containers coming through Singapore's shipment hub, stuff like that. But in between those, I began working for a company called Electroland in Los Angeles. And what they do is they create interactive environments. And they basically get public arts commissions on new construction projects, and they find a space within the construction and then fill it with sensors and lights and speakers. And all of a sudden, they turn these, what are kind of banal public areas, into really engaging and exciting experiences in public space. And what I thought was really interesting about this is I was coming from interactive art, and everybody's making stuff for galleries and museums and stuff like that. But the reaction you get from people encountering this type of work out in the real world, just on the street somewhere, not expecting to see anything that's going to delight them or inspire them, was just really, really interesting. 2 years ago, I began a new job at Fabrica as the head of interaction and online experience. If you're not familiar with Fabrica, it's an arts residency center located in Treviso, Italy, funded by the Benetton Group. And they provide residency programs for creative individuals 25 years and younger in graphic design, product design, interaction design, photography, video, music, etc. And when I started, I had a small team, and it was all interaction focused. And shortly after I began, we got a new CEO, and he was a very creative person and was very interested in kind of breaking the disciplinary model that we currently had, which was take all the graphic designers and put them over here, and then take all the programmers and put them over here, and then these guys make that stuff, and these guys make this stuff, and then occasionally, when they need to, they collaborate. But that wasn't working for us. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to switch from the departments to thematically oriented studios, which means picking a theme and then mixing the type of people that would work in that studio. And so based on my interest in public spaces, we decided to start the Urban Code Studio. And this was basically just taking the principles of interaction design and then applying them to public space. So when I arrived in Italy, this was the team I had. I had 3 guys in my department, all really, really fantastic, talented computer scientists. They're all very creative, and they all had a really nice aesthetic sensibility, but I felt that we needed to diversify quite a bit more. So we went from 3 to 10 over the course of a year, and went from having just computer scientists to interaction designers, media artists, electrical engineer, architect. So it definitely started to diversify quite a bit more. And we could take these different skill sets and different disciplines and of course different cultures, because everybody's coming from all over the world to Fabrica, and apply them to what we were kind of studying in the Urban Code Studio to create certain projects. And the types of projects that were created were very diverse, ranging from exhibitions with interactive installations to speculative design objects to politically motivated data visualizations, even to some like urban development proposals. And so I started to think, well, we had this one person who was a really fantastic iOS developer. And I began to wonder, what could we do with mobile apps or mobile devices, just in general, that could be applied to public space? And started to think about what exists out there, what is out there that we can kind of reference. And if you look at what the most popular, most downloaded apps for iPhone and Android are, you see that they're not really ever about the space that you're currently in. If anything, most of them are taking you away from the space you're currently in. They're kind of seeking your attention and behaving as distractions. And so you kind of end up with this world where everybody's kind of focusing on, this 10-centimeter rectangle of glass, when really what we should be doing is using this technology, which is fantastic, and applying it to our everyday experiences in urban situations. And I began to think of these methods of engagement, interaction mechanisms, that could be used to kind of describe the way that we can interact with public spaces. And so I started with actuating space, because I believe this is kind of the first mechanism that could be applied in these creative projects. And actuating space is really just making an impact on a space. It's almost as if you took your cell phone and used it as a remote control. So let's say you turning on and off lights, playing sounds, sending a message and displaying it in public, things of this nature. So this is a really good example of this, and this is a project from 2001 by Electroland, and it's called RGB. And what it is it was installed in the Southern California Institute of Architecture building in downtown Los Angeles, which is a very, very long warehouse building. And they put 180 meters of lights into the windows of this building. And then what you could do is you could call with your phone a special number that they had set up and receive instructions, and then use the keypad on your phone to turn on and off lights, change the patterns, change the colors, that sort of thing. And so this really kind of empowered people all of a sudden to make an impact on their space. All of a sudden they're the controller of their own environment. So it almost turns them into a performer. They're able to perform with the space. And not only are they affecting their environment, but it's also the environment that a bunch of other people are in. So you kind of have this power over everyone who's experiencing it. So fast forward 13 years, and we have this relatively new project, Unnumbered Sparks by Janet Eckelman and Aaron Koblin. And this was just installed in Vancouver a couple months ago. And what this is it's a very, very large fabric sculpture, and it's hanging over the waterfront. And what they've done is they've taken a number of high-intensity digital projectors, and they're projecting onto the surface of this fabric sculpture. And as people encounter this sculpture in the space, they're invited to visit a website on their phone in which they can actually move around with their finger, choose a color, choose an animation, choose a position on the sculpture on which they'd like that animation to appear, and actually begin to kind of play with this as a giant display. What I think is really interesting about this is that it's a higher resolution of control than what we saw with RGB. So rather than just using buttons on the keypad, now you have so much more control over the color and the pattern and that sort of thing. But also that it's multiple people doing this at once. So not only are you affecting this, but somebody who is very far away from you but can see the object is also affecting it. And you can see what they're doing and they can see what you're doing. And it begins to create these kind of ad hoc, impromptu collaborations, performances, so to speak, of people actually engaging and using this artwork and technology. And I thought there's a quote from this documentation video that I think I find really nice.
I've never thought about using my phone this way at all.
No.
And so today doing it, unreal.
So I never thought of using my phone this way. And if you think back to that list of what the most popular apps are, that shouldn't really be a surprise, because most people probably don't realize what their devices are capable of because they simply haven't been used that way. So, building off of actuating, we have dialogue with space. And so the difference here is when we begin to create a continuous communication between space. So space and people, people and space, people and people. And I think an interesting example of this is this project Fatalitor from 2011. And this, I think, is a very interesting way of taking the history of space and then applying it to the body.
This is where Faoud Salik, 37 years of age, died on January 27, 2007. This stain on my shirt is part of an application called Fatalitor. Fatalitor mixes both real shooting deaths on the streets of Los Angeles with a database of movie shootings taken place in locations around the city. How the mobile app works is when a user walks into a place where a real shooting death occurred or a Hollywood movie shooting death occurred, a trigger is sent to a device right here in the bag and sends a blood squib onto the shirt. The application Fatalitor is about how memory, violence, and place can be mapped to the body.
So what I really love about this video is if you look at the expression on the last man's face when he experiences this. Because what's happening is we're taking that history of the space and the data about it, and then we're actually doing the opposite of actuating space, where we use a phone and control something in the environment. Now the environment is making an impact on us. And it's a much more visceral and emotional way of experiencing something. This is a project made last year by one of the residents in the Urban Code studio at Fabrica. And this is an installation that basically acted as an allegory for how communication works in mainstream media.
I am the news machine. Tweet on me at colors machine. My megaphone will read your news out loud. Half of all news stories published in Switzerland, Italy, and the United States contain factual errors. The tape recorder listens, converting what it hears into text, so that the television can show it on screen. The camera watching the television converts what it sees into a signal to the radio antenna, which broadcasts the tweet. Half of all the news stories published in Swaziland, Sicily, and the United States contain feudal errors. A waiting microphone interprets the radio address as text again, and then I'll print it. Compare the original tweet with my final report. Accuracy of reproduction varies according to the clarity of your writing and the chance.
So what was nice about this project, thanks. What was really nice about this project is that the bulk of the work was the installation itself. There was no app that was made to interface with this. You simply used Twitter, which meant that anybody in the world could do it, which we encountered depending on where it was installed. So often we would get people online sending messages for the machine to read. But more often than not, it had to be interfaced locally by whoever was in the space with it from their mobile device. And what was really interesting is that it would take your input and then transform it based on the space. We ended up getting some really interesting results out of this. This one in particular says, Fabrica and Colors is working in the next edition of Colors, rumored to be about art. And the response is Da Vinci's Demons. I don't know how it got Da Vinci's Demons from that text, but it is really interesting that the subject was art and it came back with Da Vinci. Another interesting project out of the Urban Code studio was this one, which was done during the 2-week trial period, in which the resident was really interested in exploring how people could anonymously communicate together in a very highly localized area. So again, it's another installation that is highly localized to the space that it's in. There's no custom app that has been written to interface with this thing. It's utilizing SMS, it's utilizing Twitter, these existing platforms. And the interesting thing is SMS is used quite a bit on city scale projects. And so you end up with this project, which was installed in Bristol last year, called Hello Lamppost, which was a way of getting the citizens of the city to engage with the urban infrastructure that's all around them. So within the first week that this was launched, they had over 2,000 people participating with nearly 500 objects, which I think is a really interesting way of creating this new connection, this new kind of communication of a city and its citizens. And the fact that they're kind of giving this information to these objects, and then the objects are reciting it back to other people as if they have this self-awareness, I think is really playful and interesting. And when you take that one object and expand it to a city worth of objects, you create this kind of layer over the city of kind of activity and awareness. So the last one that I'd like to talk about is Space's filter. And so thinking about this, if you could consider the properties and qualities of a space as variables that you could use to apply as a filter to a project. This is a project called Sadly by Your Side, which is another endeavor out of Fabrica, which was an idea of how to release a brand new full album of music in a unique way. So in this case, the app is using the camera to look out at what the environment conditions are and taking those properties, converting them based on their color values, and then applying it to filters and properties of the music. So what's next? I like to think that this could be it. And what this is Project Tango, which is a project out of Google's Advanced Technologies and Projects group. And what they've done is they've taken this little cell phone tablet and they've integrated a lot of really advanced telemetry sensors in it. So positioning, rotation, things of this nature. So it's very, very precise in terms of knowing its position and orientation, even indoors. In addition to that, they've added essentially what is a Microsoft Kinect, which can then scan the environment. So imagine walking around and being able to record the conditions of your environment. And of course, the obvious applications of this are mapping spaces. We can take a street view or maps and put it indoors. We can obviously do augmented reality stuff with this. But I think it's really interesting that what we do is we advance the hardware in the device, the sensors, and then we're able to take that precision that we've improved upon and then apply it to our kind of creative endeavors in software. And the lead technical director of this project, Johnny Chung Lee, had this to say in the documentation.
I want to work with the developers who are excited about doing more than the touchscreen app and help us explore this journey. And as we evolve the hardware, we are excited to see what the developers will produce.
So doing more than the touchscreen app, I think, is what it all gets back to. And we've seen that it's possible. And I've shown you a few projects that I think are interesting use cases of this. And I'd like to see this occurring more. Apps that go beyond the touchscreen to change the experience of space. Thank you.